I'm really, really honored to be here today talking to you, listening to Nikhil and Kendra, and just hearing the stories of how successful Georgia Gov Interactive and the state has been in implementing their platform solution. You all should really be proud of yourselves. I see organizations in the federal government, in DoD, all kinds of state and local and international, and you guys are the creme de la creme, for sure, of running a product like a product should be run. So congratulations on that. Today what I'm going to talk about, and excuse the cheeky title there, is what is this digital cloud platform that Georgia.gov is running on top of? And what does cloud really mean anyway? And what I'm hoping that you get out of this conversation when we're done is really understanding what we do behind the scenes and how that might be similar or different from running your own technology inside of a data center or inside of a managed service like an AWS. All right? And we'll do questions at the end. It sounds like we're going to compress and aggregate all the questions for the end. So please hold on to them until then. So let me start by talking about this idea of paradigm shifts. When I was in school in Santa Cruz, California, when I wasn't hanging out under the redwoods or at the beach, I was in class sometimes. And one of my favorite things that I learned about was this guy, Thomas Kuhn, who was a philosopher, and he wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And he talked about this idea of a paradigm shift, and the main characteristic of a paradigm shift being change that happens really quickly. It's not something that's slow and gradual, it's something that happens really quickly, and it fundamentally changes the base from which we're operating from in our mental models, and really enables a lot of forward movement from there. So if we think about paradigm shifts, we can think about Copernicus here and the idea that the sun was in the middle of the solar system and everything was rotating around that. That really was a big paradigm shift. We can think about other paradigm shifts such as bottled water. When I grew up, you drank water out of the hose or out of the water fountain. And now there's a multi-billion-dollar industry basically selling plastic with tap water inside of it that we're all just very accustomed to and very useful. It's a paradigm shift. Another one would be the iPhone. This, to me, is really interesting because it's like Star Trek, right? It's basically we're living the dream with our communicator. And when the iPhone first came out, I was talking to a friend, and he said, man, there's no way anybody's going to pay $600 for a stupid cell phone. And if you have any Apple stock, I would get rid of it now because there's just no way that this is going to be a successful idea. And unfortunately, I'm not financially savvy enough to have realized that I should have bought some Apple stock at that time. But that's a paradigm shift. We can't imagine the things that we do today without these devices, right? So the paradigm shift I want to talk about today in relation to Georgia Gov is the idea of cloud computing. So what is cloud computing? It depends who you ask, but there's this kind of magical idea of out in the cloud somewhere, we're putting our stuff and things are happening and it's really great and we don't have to deal with it. But it also could just be some guy sitting in a basement backing up some files to a server somewhere. It really depends on how we define and how we understand cloud computing. I'm going to tell you some stories about different ways that people have implemented the cloud and the pros and cons of going either direction. I don't know who said this, but I like it because it's sort of true. There really isn't any such thing as the cloud. It's somebody else's computer. It's a vendor or a series of vendors managing systems on your behalf with varying levels of support and compliance and technology behind it. But ultimately, you're offloading something that you own and you manage onto somebody else's stuff that they own and they manage. Okay? It's after lunch. I thought I needed to get some laughs here, right? An ego fire. Yeah, so cloud doesn't really always mean what we think it is. We can think of cloud as three different flavors. These are the three asses of cloud computing. Infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is the idea that you're basically buying the ping, the power, the pipe from another vendor, and you're putting together your solution out of these very low-level components. You're buying server instances, you're buying bandwidth, you're configuring connectivity in firewalls, you're buying disk space, compute, all of that idea. So it's a lot like taking what you have if you're managing something in-house and then going out to the cloud and putting it back together in the cloud. And for some applications and some workloads, it's really appropriate. If you're building back office applications or you're dealing with extremely classified private information that's not going to be covered by a vendor that does one of these other forms of cloud computing, infrastructure as a service makes sense. The other one that you're probably really familiar with is SaaS. SaaS is software as a service. And the easiest way to think about software as a service is Gmail or Microsoft Office 365. These are things that are tailor-built applications that do one or a few things really well. And you buy them in a subscription-based model generally, and you get to use these applications rather than running them on their own. And for things that are very specific, that don't change, like email, these are really great. CRM is another example, like Salesforce. These are great ways to go when you're buying software applications. The middle one, or I guess he's on the right, or she, is PaaS. And PaaS is platform as a service. And that's what the Acquia Cloud Platform is, and that's what Georgia Gov Interactive is using behind the scenes to power their platform. And the best way to think about platform as a service is Legos. You've got all these different pieces of various shapes that you can combine in different ways to make different things. And there are vendors out there, like Acquia and like Phase 2, that you could think of as the master builders that can provide the Death Star blueprint for how you would build something with this platform. But you have a balance of flexibility and control because you're not fully making something custom with infrastructure as a service. You're not buying software that does a very specific thing. You're buying a platform of reusable components that can be recombined together. So that's platform as a service. And that's where I think for organizations like Georgia Gov Interactive, there's really a lot of value. So let's talk a couple of stories here. But before I was with Acquia, I worked for the Department of Homeland Security. Hard to believe they let me in, but they did. And we built something called Web Content Management as a Service. This was back in, I want to say 2010, 2011 or so. The federal government had some baby steps in cloud computing and open source with Drupal, led in large part at DHS by the team that I was working with. And there was a very forward-thinking CIO, Richard Spires, and a guy under him, Keith Trippy, who thought that we should take all these different content management systems, I think there were 18 or so, at all the different DHS components, and consolidate them on a single platform, much like you guys did with Georgia Gov. So they chose Drupal, and they needed a procurement vehicle for cloud, and at that time, the only vehicle that was available was for infrastructure as a service. It was a blanket purchase agreement, and they were able to go ahead and buy some IaaS, infrastructure as a service, from a company called CGI Federal. So what does that really mean? So they're going from consolidating from lots of different systems onto a single open platform, Drupal, which is good. But they're moving from many on-premise data centers to building kind of their own custom thing in the cloud, in this infrastructure environment. In Acquia, we were able to support them from a guidance and architecture perspective, but because they weren't allowed to buy what we offered on the cloud, they were kind of stuck with this approach. So there was a lot of different pieces to this that they had to go through. So there was the actual infrastructure provider, which was CGI Federal. There was Acquia providing support for Drupal. There was Akamai, which is a CDN and web security layer in front of everything, which is really important and great. There's Red Hat, which is supporting operating systems and selling them licenses for servers. There's a system integrator, or two or three, Booz Allen Hamilton, and blah, blah, blah. There are a bunch of different ones in there as sort of the team on the ground, because they didn't have anyone like the Georgia Gov team has. There was a Drupal dev shop, like a Phase 2, that was in there providing implementation support. There were random pieces of software that they had to buy to do things, like replicate databases. So they had to pay for licenses and support for this thing called Tungsten. They had to pay Oracle for MySQL, which is a database support. They needed DevOps tools. How did they build and deploy their code? How did they manage releases? How did they track issues? So they needed to pay for software from a company called Atlassian. And there were lots more. But the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that when you're going just the infrastructure as a service route, you're not really getting all the benefits that you can from cloud for that level of functionality. For public-facing web content and digital experiences, you're really having an expensive headache here. And I forgot to hit the button that made it do that really cool thing. So let me contrast that a little bit with PASS and what might happen if DHS was going the PASS route, which is what Georgia Gov is doing. A lot of these things are included in the platform. So they would get the infrastructure, they would get all the cats and dogs, the software licenses, the operating systems, the development tools, the support, all part of that platform and managed for them. So the net of that, what happens is that the people responsible for managing all this stuff and the costs that go into managing all this stuff can be focused on innovation instead and really focusing on the users, which you guys are able to do. And that's the promise of platform as a service with cloud computing, is we deal with all the operation stuff and you can focus on innovation. Okay? So that's the real value that you're getting there over build it yourself. A couple of other examples. This is the MTA, the New York Transportation System down there. They're doing some really cool stuff, but the story I want to tell is about Hurricane Sandy. So they're on our platform, and they knew Hurricane Sandy was coming, and they were worried that the site was going to go down. What we did is we helped them do some performance testing and load testing to make sure that everything was kosher. We found a couple of little application performance issues that we helped them remediate, and we temporarily upsized their capacity in anticipation of this hurricane coming. So Nikhil was talking about with cloud, you have this scaling and this elasticity. The other thing that you get is you don't have to pay for that all at once. So MTA was able to proactively say, we need this much more stuff to support the anticipated load. Let's buy that, and then when Hurricane Sandy is done, we'll go ahead back to our baseline levels. And so they're not buying more than they need. So the hurricane came, the site stayed up, sustained a lot of traffic. That was great. But the real story here, I think, is that the MTA's offices went down. There was no connectivity from the MTA to the outside world. So how would they update their site if it's out there on the cloud? The way that they did that for a period of about 4 hours was they were text messaging the Acquia support team with content updates, and we were able to update the site with information and news until someone was able to come back online from their team. And so that's the other big value add that you get from platform as a service and a managed digital platform is somebody has your back. You have support, not just for your organization and your applications, but for the whole platform itself that you can call at any time, and if there's a critical issue, someone's going to help you. So that's the story there that I really like. Another story with the MTA is that Drupal, which we've been talking about as this great platform for digital experiences and mobile experiences, can really power other types of channels as well. And so the initiative that they're working on today is all of the subway information signs inside of every subway station in New York City and the boroughs are going to be powered by Drupal. And content it's not going to be a website for each one of these little signs. These are just channels that we're publishing content that's managed centrally through APIs to these different outputs. So that's the other advantage of using an open technology like Drupal, is that you have the flexibility for when the web page or the mobile device is not the only kind of endpoint that we're talking about. Okay. So another story, this one is a little more like resiliency. Acquia works with a lot of people outside of public sector. And some of the more fun ones, and unfortunately I've never been able to actually get a ticket to any of these events or anything, is the Grammys. And talking about scalability and elasticity, they have one night where that site better not go down. And the rest of the year, very small resource needs, but you can imagine the chaos and the tsuris that would happen if this site had an issue on Grammy night. And so just like the MTA was able to do with Hurricane Sandy, they work with the Acquia support team to anticipate traffic needs, proactively scale up for that 1 week, and then scale back down for the rest of the year. So they save a lot of money, and they know that they're going to be okay when all of that traffic comes to the Grammys. Similar examples is like the Olympics in Sochi, same idea. It's a very time-boxed event, and once that event's done, they can scale back and be back to sort of baseline levels. So another analogy that I like to think about is if you have an application and it's sitting inside of your data center or a hosting provider somewhere, and you want to move it out to the cloud. It's kind of like moving your car from your own garage into somebody else's garage. If you're just going the infrastructure as a service route, or you're going more of the unmanaged sort of provider route. It's like George Carlin said, you're buying a new place for your stuff. Exactly. Whereas with a managed digital platform as a service, you're moving it into a garage with a very attractive mechanic and all the tools necessary to keep the car running, and somebody who's constantly making sure it's full of gas, and the tires are inflated, and the oil's changed, and all you have to do is get in and go drive. And that's the value that you get from platform as a service and the Acquia Cloud platform. Okay? A couple of other things I want to just talk about in general with the platform. One is security. I know that's very important to everyone, especially people in this room who are staking the goodwill of citizens on the site having integrity and not being compromised or not being down. So some of the ways that we provide that assurance is with our compliance. So we're what's called FedRAMP compliant. FedRAMP is a federal standard that all cloud vendors who sell to the federal government need to comply with. And it's based on this thing called the NIST 853 set of controls, which are a bunch of different security and compliance controls covering everything from intrusion detection to auditing to access controls to disaster recovery plans. Pretty much every enterprise contingency that you can think of is encapsulated in these controls. And we're required to undergo regular audits to make sure that we're in compliance with these controls. We're also required to publish results of these audits and these scans, which anyone can go to the FedRAMP website today and download. And so there's a level of transparency there as well. So we've made a tremendous investment into resources to support that level of compliance. And certainly all of our federal customers and a lot of state and local customers are starting to really demand that as well. So that's an important part of our security. We also have a security operations center up in Boston at our headquarters. This is where we have folks that are monitoring blogs and social media and really are tied into the security community, and so we can know about potential threats before they arise. One of these this was, gosh, almost 2 years ago now. It was a vulnerability that was discovered in Drupal. It was coined Drupal-geddon because of the potential impact. Someone could basically input a string of characters into a login form or any form on your website and gain access to the root user of the website and deface it or do whatever they wanted with it. So one of our other large state customers was in the process of transitioning to our platform. They had a few of their sites on our platform, but a large number still in their on-prem data center. When this Drupal-geddon vulnerability came out, the way that some of these agencies found out about it is because their sites got compromised. None of the ones on our platform got compromised, and the reason is we were able to address that at the platform level. You didn't need to apply the security patch to your individual site. Our security team was able to identify that long before the public did and patch it at the underlying database driver level, basically. And so it protected everyone on our platform, and then we could roll out the application patches to our customers in time. So that's one way that platform as a service really helps keep your site secure. We also have a large number of the Drupal security team members employed by Acquia and working on our engineering and security teams. And we provide some support that proactively does patching for you called remote administration. So if there's often security patches that come out for Drupal. It's open source. Anybody can look at it. Anybody can write something that could be malicious. We're looking for those, and we'll work with you to proactively patch that on our platform, so you don't have to worry about it and you don't get caught with an issue there. So those are a few ways that we're working to keep Georgia Gov and all of the agency's sites secure. And we're going to be hopefully looking at some other ways to do that as well. Nikhil talked about denial of service attacks. Those are getting larger and larger all the time. And there's ways that we can help mitigate those by putting an additional layer of protection around the platform as well, which is something we hope to do in the future. So I realize I'm kind of talking a little fast. I have too much sweet tea here. But that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. So there's my thank you slide. And when we get to the round of questions, I really look forward to answering any and all.